Hello, today is Monday, November 18th, and welcome to episode 386 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I'm Jessica Jones, and I'm joined today by our favorites, Matt Hayden and Jeffrey Wells, and a first-time show appearance by Marc Raimondi. Welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Okay. This week, so what we're talking about today, this weekend, President Biden authorized the first use of U.S. supplied long range missiles by Ukraine for strikes inside Russia. I think we've been kind of waiting for this headline for a while, so I don't think it may be surprising to some and not surprising to others. The weapons are likely to be initially employed against Russia and North Korean troops in defense of Ukrainian forces in the Kursk region of Western Russia. President Biden's decision is a is a change in U.S. policy, and according to reports, his choice has divided his own advisors and comes 2 months before a new incoming administration. While officials say they do not expect the shift to fundamentally alter the course of the war, one of the goals of the change could be that they're trying to send a message to the North Koreans that they're vulnerable and that they should not send more troops. For their part, the Russian military is launching a major assault, trying to drive out Ukrainian forces. And in recent days, Ukrainian President Zelensky has said that Kiev would like to end the war with Russia in the next year through, quote, diplomatic means. The Ukrainians are likely hoping that they'll be able to trade any Russian territory they continue to hold in Kursk for Ukrainian territory held by Russia in these future talks. As far as settlement talks, Russian President Putin has made clear he will only accept talks with Ukraine if Kiev surrenders Ukrainian territory that Moscow holds, and Zelensky has rejected that. So some new developments. First, I'm going to turn to you, Marc. How do you think we got here? We've just elected a new administration. We are, in late November almost, and we're just now hearing the announcement about using long-range missiles in Russia. Is it about time? Is this too late?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of schools of thought on that. One of which I've heard quite often and from the beginning, is that these conflicts are very easy to start and very, very difficult to stop. But if you can get to a ceasefire within perhaps 60 to 90 days at the start of a conflict, you have a much higher chance of it ending. Whereas when you let it go for months and years, you get really entrenched, and then we end up in a kind of a war of attrition, which unfortunately it seems that Ukraine is not on the right side of that war of attrition. So will it be a game changer? Well, it certainly could have been, but when you come out of the gate saying what you're not going to do, when you have the Secretary of Defense saying our number one concern is not getting into a shooting war with Russia, and then you have all of these red lines about what Ukraine can and can't do with the weapon systems we're providing, that really puts constraints on the ability for Ukraine to have either stopped the invasion in the tracks, or maybe even gotten to that early peace settlement. So yeah, I'm happy to see it. I don't know if we have enough time left in the game, so to speak, for it to really have an effect, but we'll see.
So, Jeffrey, to Mark's point about red lines, it seems as if one red line has been removed, right? You can now use long-range missiles in Russia. How do you think Ukrainians, what are your suggestions to them as they think about this new capability? What should they be doing?
Thank you, Jess. Lincoln once said, I'm a slow talker and a slow walker, but I never walk back. And, here his wisdom is simple, it's steady, it's powerful. And that's where Ukraine stands today, moving forward, slowly perhaps, but whatever they do next, there's no coming back. Perhaps it's the release of Gladiator 2 this week, but I'm thinking of Hannibal poised at the base of the Alps, daring and ambitious with an army ready to carve a path through the impossible. He made bold moves, striking fear into the heart of Rome. His triumph at Cannae was a brilliance, and it shattered. It was a shattering blow to the mighty Roman forces. But what became of it? A fleeting victory, a moment of triumph that failed to break Rome's will. And Hannibal never marched on the city of Rome itself. And in time, Rome adapted and endured and prevailed. And perhaps this is the same thing that could happen with the Russians. Ukraine now faces a similar choice: strike boldly. Yes, the temptation is there. It's a decisive blow against Russian targets might feel like a modern day Cannae. Tactically, it is very tempting, but history whispers its warnings. Overreach could alienate the allies, provoke a backlash, and drain resources before any lasting goals are within reach. And acting too soon well, that could leave Ukraine in a vulnerable position, especially with the uncertainties of an incoming U.S. administration. Sometimes the best strategy isn't the boldest, but it's the wisest. Wait, plan, and prepare for the right moment. Patience is no weakness. And let's not forget, Ukraine's battle isn't just fought with Russia. Ukraine must navigate the shifting tides of U.S. politics. A new administration could tighten the reins, altering the terms of their support. That's a challenge. Making every action today resonate with policymakers of tomorrow demonstrates that diplomacy is vital as any weapon in this fight. Biden's shift does open the door, but Ukraine must step through with care and endurance, calculation, restraint. These are the tools of victory. Ukraine's path to success lies in balancing daring actions with a keen awareness of the terrain ahead. Bold moves, yes, but always with an eye for the long game, and figure out what you can negotiate with.
Matt, I want to turn to you. What do you think this decision means as we look to the next year, possibly the third year of this conflict? And where does this decision leave the incoming administration?
Well, the one thing we've heard that's of substance on this is that there's going to be negotiations and conversations between both Russia and Ukraine, with the U.S. in the middle, to kind of arbitrate this conversation further. And when you come into a negotiation like that, you do want all the cards on the table. So there is actually kind of a net benefit of having this red line disposed of in advance of those conversations, because it doesn't require the new administration to do anything that seems escalatory going into negotiations, and yet they still have this capacity and capability to kind of play cards with as appropriately. Now to Jeffrey's point, history is a very strong guide that we have to be careful with. If this turns into a lot of long-range weapon usage between now and January 20th, that's going to make that conversation a little more difficult. But the Kremlin says everything is escalatory. It's going to really fall down to the Ukrainians being strategic in this area. But the net benefit of having it not be something that has to be added as a part of the negotiations can be seen as a pretty strong positive.
Thanks. Thanks, guys. That's a wrap. Thanks so much to Devlin Burney, Claude Jennings, and our special guest, Marc, today for their help in producing today's episode. Join us again on Wednesday, November 20th for another episode of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. Check us out on YouTube. You can check out what books we have on our bookshelves. I'm looking at Marc's right now, seeing what he's reading. And if you like what you heard or saw, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.